Okay, guys, my name is Nuwish Numbanugon, and I'm Academic Officer, AO of CSP, responsible for LB251 subject, and this upcoming midterm exam. We are going to deal with two questions. First one is from a Janopadon session in which we should be able to cope with constitutionalism. We should be able to assess and determine the weakness of current constitution. And we should study about the separation of power, especially check and balance. And the second question will belong to a Jan Konkanok, in which we should study about the constitutional right, limitation, and equality, as well as the freedom of expression and assembly. Before we start, I recommend you to follow my tutorial session today from this note. It is the note that summarizes everything from a Jan Nopadon part, so you will know briefly on what exactly happened in class, and it's much more easy to follow because today's contents in which I concluded, I will give you like a very fast wrap up about the information on a Janopadon part will be taken from this note. So the first one, we should study about the constitutionalism, right? Okay, so before I will introduce you to the concept of constitutionalism, I want to introduce you to the concept of rule of law or หลักนิติธรรม and the concept of legal state or หลักนิติรัฐ So fundamentally, the principle of these two is very simple. It is to create a law governing society. So to be elaborated, is sort of the power should not be conglomerate at just only one or one group of people, but everyone shall be governed by law. And if there must be anyone who have power, that person or that power should be appointed by law. And constitutionalism is the same idea. It's aimed to create the law governing society in which is focused on the role of constitution. And you may see that it is about the self-regulating society as well. So the concept is quite similar to Rousseau's direct democracy theory of state. So for constitutionalism, it's also aimed to create a self-regulating society. So it means people establish the constitution and people follow it. It means they are following no one except themselves, as well as the Rousseau theory of state. It's like people create a social contract, and they all throw general will into the collective body of sovereigns, in which every people is the part of sovereign. So it means when sovereign enact the law, people follow that law. It means they follow no one except no one else. But when we talk about the constitutionalism, the subject is the constitution. So what are constitution? Very simple. The short one is that the constitution is the supreme and sole source of law. But for more detail, according to Black's definition of constitution, it first must be public law. It is the organic and fundamental law of nation or state. It can be in written or unwritten form. It establishes the character and concept of government, and it displays the manner of exercise of sovereign power. So theoretically, it means that constitution is the highest law. So there should be no law contradict or in conflict with constitution. That is just in theory. But there still is someone who is the big guy, that bigger than constitution. That one is the constituent power holder. What is this power? The constituent power holder is the power to establish the constitution. So it means that it is the supreme and factual political power. So we'll call it de facto power. So it means that source of this kind of power is not law. So it is not de jure, but it is fact or the actual circumstance. The power holder has what? ability to establish the constitution, which means they have an ability to set the rules on how all power shall be allocated. And the power allocated to organs is called the constituted power, or the legal power that derives from law. This is the diagram. The constituent power holder established the constitution. The constitution will indicate the political system by stipulate the sovereign. For example, if they say that sovereign belong to people, we are in democratic society. Theoretically, we are in democratic society, but in fact, we don't know. Or if they say that the sovereign belong to king, we are in monarchy. And you can see that after it's indicated political system, it's also allocated power to state organs, in which, in this case, I present it into 3 organs. Actually, not 3 organs, but 3 branches, which is judicial, legislative, and executive, which will relate into the next subject about the separation of power. But we can see that they hold a power in that was derived from constitution or located from constitution. That is the constituted power. So you may already see that we have 3 branches: legislative, executive, and judicial. It is all about the separation of power. But before I will talk about that, I would like to introduce you to the concept of separation of power first. According to Lord Acton, he said that power tends to corrupt and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So absolute power in this case means that whatever you have done, there is no negative consequence. And what do you think? What if you have the absolute power? What if whatever you have done, there's no negative consequence? It means that you can do every single thing without any negative consequence, or you can do no wrong. So it will lead to abuse of power. So it means that in this case, power is what you use to control the others. If I be more specific, it means that if you have the power that is absolute and you use to control everything, and then you have a presumption that the power holder can does nothing wrong because there's no negative consequence, it will cause chaos. People will hunger for power. They will seek for it by any means, no matter whether the methods are right or wrong, because when you acquire the power, it means you can do no wrong. I'll skip the Montesquieu idea on separation of power here and Madison here, because you can read it from the conclusion and from my note. But this the very first idea that display the necessity of separation of power. So separation of power have 2 models. First one proposed by Locke. Locke proposed that the branch should be separated into 3 branches. First is legislative, second is executive, and the third one is federative, where judicial branch is under executive. So this idea have a problem, and it was not adopted and is not adopted in nowadays, because judicial can exercise power effectively and independently when they have to check and balance legislative and federative, as well as maybe others organs, which didn't relate to executive branch. But when judicial branch have to work on the case that involve an officer from the executive branch, but at the same time, judicial is under the influence of executive. So it means they work for executive. They won't be able to freely and justly exercise their power in order to raise a case or raise the justice to the officer that work in executive branch, because they are under its influence. So there's a second proposed model from Montesquieu, in which this model is adopted to nowadays and was separate into a lot of models. So we have presidentialism, parliamentarism, and semi-presidential system. But at the very, very first step of separation of power in which Montesquieu introduced, he just only derived it. He just only separated the power into three branches. So legislative one, executive, and judiciary. So we can see that judiciary is not under executive anymore. So the structure is that legislative will consist of two houses. One is assembly of nobles, in which we call aristocracy. So if we compare it to our political system right now, this may be House of Senate or higher house. An assembly of representative, which represent democracy. So this may House of Representative nowadays. So this is higher house and lower house. But we have to claim that Montesquieu didn't create this model to truly show the democratics of any author's purpose, but this model is just a solution for the survival of monarchy. So we can see that kings still involved in appointment of judiciary branch. So in fact, kings still have power, royal families still have power according to this model. But from the past that king have absolute power, he just dilutes his power and give it to give it to executive, and give it to judiciary. So this is the survival of monarchy. So that's the question that was raised to me in Q&A CSP recently. So the question is that, do you think the pattern of separation of power, which provides check and balance mechanism, must place the legislative branch and executive branch and a judicial branch in exactly equal position without any exception? If not, what ground that can reasonably serve as an argument to support a slightly superior or slightly inferior position of one branch of power compared to others? I already give the answers, but I will explain it in detail as well because it is in regard with the three system of parliamentarism, presidentialism, and semi-presidential system. So I would like you to know about two doctrine that I propose. That is the ground of a slightly superior or slightly inferior position of one branch to the others. So first ground is about the democratic legitimacy, or you maybe call it political legitimacy. And second one is about the continuity of power. I will explain further. Firstly, I would like to introduce you to the parliamentarism that is Thai model. So there's three branch. Parliament is legislative. Government here is executive, where Prime Minister is a head of government and court is judiciary. The system of Thailand is that people elected the legislative. In this case, it's about the representative. I will not talk about the Senate. And the parliament, in current constitution, who have a power to appoint PM or Prime Minister, but in terms of check and balance, we can see that Parliament can appoint, and this means the Prime Minister will why the vote of confidence, or in Thai is อภิปรายไม่ไว้วางใจ And the government can also dissolve the parliament or dissolve the legislative branch by the function of dissolve, in which we call ยุบสภา and the court judiciary will check legality and constitutionality of legislative act and executive act. So when we talk about which branch have superior power over the others, in this case we will consider the parliament and government. So parliament have slightly more power, and it's from the ground that I represent to all of you that it is about the democratic legitimacy. We can see that people choose parliament, so it means they have more democratic legitimacy, which means when they have more democratic legitimacy, parliament have slightly superior power over the executive. But when we see about the presidentialism, we can see that people elect both branch, which is legislative and executive. So they have equal power because they have equal democratic legitimacy. But another doctrine that I already proposed to you is about the continuation of power or continuity of power will be displayed obviously in the model of semi-presidentialism. So people both elect parliament, people both elect government. So it means they both elect legislature and both elect the executive. But in this case, government have slightly superior power. Even they are equal in term of democratic legitimacy because both are elected by people, but they have superior power. So it means we can say that government can dissolve the parliament, but we can see that parliament can have no direct power to dismiss or to dissolve the government. They can only take the president out with some ground. For example, by impeachment mechanism. And impeachment mechanism will have kind of its own strict rule you have to see on the French law, but we can see that in this case, government have superior power over it. Even they have equal democratic legitimacy, but this is about the continuity of power. Why? Because government or executive branch is the branch that manage. They manage the national affair. So in Thai is maybe that they are ผู้บริหาร and เป็นผู้ปกครอง so it means that they should have more power because they should have continuity of power to govern society, to rule society in terms of management, in terms of like the national affairs, kind of that. So this is why I propose two doctrines as you see democratic legitimacy. So the branches elected by people shall have power that is slightly superior to the others, which are displayed in parliamentarism, where legislative have more power than executive, and it's displayed that when in presidentialism, both executive and legislative have equal democratic legitimacy, so they have equal power. But when it's come to semi-presidentialism, even both have equal democratic legitimacy, but one need more continuity of power. That's why one have one which mean executive have slightly superior power because they have to deal with the direction and management of national affairs, kind of that. And because of this kind of structure, so degree of check and balance is that parliamentarism have the highest degree, followed by semi-presidentialism, and the last one is presidentialism. So let's look at the exam. This is the past exam of Ajahn Noppadol part. So he said that please explain the concept of constitutionalism. So this is the first part that you have to answer. Provide your assessment of the Constitution of the Kingdom of Thailand BE 2560 and based on the concept of constitutionalism. So I will just give a guide to answer because I have to say that this is quite subjective. It's about the assessment. It's about your will towards the Constitution as well. But maybe the fact is that first you have to explain what is constitutionalism. So it's maybe about it is the rule of law that focus on the role of constitution. You may explain briefly what constitution is, and you may say the concept of democratic liberal value. And this value will display the criteria of good constitution. So let's check in my note there's around 7 criteria of good constitution. And then you use that criteria to assess whether the constitution, whether it is good or bad. Why? And this is the assessment based on concept of constitutionalism in terms of the criteria of good constitution derived from democratic liberal values. And for the second one, it is about Ajahn Konkanok part. Have to say that I cannot give you exact point on this because the slide of Ajahn Konkanok have almost everything is depend on which part you choose. And her question is quite open. So there's no right, there's no wrong, they only have a good or bad answer, and I'm not quite sure whether my answer is good or not, but let's see. So the statement is that Thailand truly respects freedom of religion without any reasoning, while severely undermining freedom of speech. Would you agree or disagree? And why do you think so? So you have to answer to maybe 2 points first. First, about the freedom of religion in Thailand. What is the extent of freedom of religion, where you can find the case, where you can find the law, and whether it have restraint or not. And in this case, my opinion is not. They have a lot of restraint on it. Some of the examples that the restraint on maybe monk or religion's priest can vote. So maybe you can give an argument. For example, you can raise up the principle of equality of formal or substantive equality. And in this case, if we raise up like formal equality, we can say that politics is about everyone, and monk and priest kind of that they are also a person. And there's no ground to limit. You may explain in your manner, or you may have another argument for that. And then for the second one, it's about the freedom of speech. So you may raise 1 or 2 or maybe more than that about the case or about the law. So the source of kind of freedom of speech, or maybe like freedom of expression and assembly and movement, is who relate to kind of the Assembly Act. I guess I cannot remember the exact name, but it's act about the assembly or act about the movement, that sort of that. And you may refer to criminal law. Criminal law may be section 112, that is about like in practice people when criticize royal family is sufficient to be charged for this, and it's no matter whether they will be convicted guilty or not, just only be charged, they already be condemned, and they already lose a lot of opportunities. Or maybe another one is like it's about the, I cannot remember exactly section, but it's about criminal defamation. So this may be a material that you can use, or this may be example of the argument or the source that you can use to answer the question. You may able to explain it, and I recommend that you should have your own reason. You should have your own explanation, not only just source of the law, not just only to that, oh, because there's this law, so we have no freedom of speech. No, you must show why it restrict freedom of speech as well. You must show why that there's a restraint or there's no restraint in freedom of religions. As the instructions say that you have to support your argument by referring to relevant law or cases, which mean that you have to show whether you agree or not, you have to show your reason, and you have to show the supporting evidence. So that is all for today, and I hope that every of your effort will pay off to you guys in this upcoming midterm examination. I hope everyone have a good score, including me myself. I hope for good score as well. So thank you, and if you have any question, please feel free to walk in and Q&A session of CSP.